Hey guys, my name is Ismas and today we're going to be looking at how to design a dress in Blender using some reference images here. So this is the dress we're going to be doing. Let me just show you my the pattern, the original pattern, and how it works. So we're going to create a pattern and then see how to turn it into the design we want, and most importantly be able to add in extra details in case we want to. For example, if I want to add in let's go to the reference image again. These lines here, all you have to do is just push in an edge like that and add sewing lines just like that, and that should give us a fold there. So this project, folks, is going to be available to my Patreon. So if you want to get it, you can become a Patreon and get it from there. So there is an add-on called Simply Cloth that makes the process far easier, but we're not going to be using that because I understand some of you may not be able to access it, but it's very cheap to get, and a link in the description if you want to use it. It makes the whole process easier, but as I said, we're not going to be using that. Let me just show you how you can quickly create any type of cloth. You just drag it into our position, it's hit play, and you would have a t-shirt. It says a skirt, and hit play, and you have yourself a skirt. So let's do this from scratch. For anyone who can't get the Simply Cloth add-on, which I would really recommend, and a link is in the description if you want to get that. Okay, so this is not really going to be a step-by-step tutorial, so I want to first get through the basics or the core fundamentals of the entire process out of the way so that we can go into the time-lapse without me needing to explain every step that I'm making. So one thing you have to do when you're creating a cloth, you want to have a base model that is going to act as the collision object for your clothes so that you can get the wrinkles right. And when you select the object, make sure you give it a collision property. So if you have two patterns, which is just two islands of a mesh, to sew them together, just select one edge like this and then another edge like that, and bridge them, right click, bridge the edge loops, and then hit X to delete the faces so that you have that connection like that. This is going to tell Blender what parts of the mesh you want to sew together. So this is going to weld this to this. If we turn on the sewing property under the shape properties. So if I press play, you can see that we get this is welded to this, or is sewed together like that. Another thing you will see in the time lapse is that I have my gravity animated so I have it animated to start at 0 like that, so that we have the sewing taking place before the gravity kicks in, and at around 32 I turn on the gravity back on so that the cloth can collide with the collision object correctly. Another thing I did, you'll see in the time lapse, is that under the sewing, I have my maximum sewing force set to 3 so that the sewing is not abrupt, so that it gives the wrinkles time to propagate and start to form. Another thing to note is that if you have a cloth and a collision object, the default settings will let the cloth collide with the object, but you can see that there is a big gap between the cloth and the collision object, and that makes it very hard for the cloth to have good wrinkles. So to reduce that gap, all you have to do is first select the collision object, go under the outer thickness and reduce it to something like 0.3 or 2, and depending on the scale of your object and how much gap you want here. This will reduce the gap quite significantly, but you see we still have a good gap here. Reducing this further will create a few artifacts. The cloth might start going through the collision object. You don't want that. What you can do is select the cloth itself and go under collisions and reduce the distance, the collision distance as well there to something like 0.0 or 2 or 1, and that should make that gap nearly disappear. We are also seeing another problem here. The cloth itself is intersecting with itself, it's going through itself, so you have to turn on self collision. But when you turn that on, you see that the simulation, especially if you have a lot of geometry, will slow down, and let me first add in that geometry just to show you. and it will start to wrinkle like this and create a lot of unexpected wrinkles. To avoid that, just make sure that under the self-collision you reduce the distance, the self-collision distance as well, to something like 0.1, and that should speed up your simulation and also give you better self-collisions. Those are the fundamentals of what we're going to be doing here. We're going to go to the time-lapse. I'll still continue talking over the time-lapse, but I won't be explaining these steps as I've already shown them to you here. So let's dive in and get started. Yeah, so you can get this base model on my Patreon page. It will be your collision object, and now we are creating the sewing patterns that we're going to sew together to get the design, the dress design we want here. The best place to get sewing patterns is Pinterest or Google. You can just type in sewing patterns and you'll see a lot of them that you can use in your projects. My reference image doesn't really have any sewing patterns, but I can estimate what the sewing patterns are going to be like by just looking at the seams in the dress there, and that's what I'm tracing out here. And what I'm doing is also just estimating where these patterns are going to be relative to the position, relative to the angle of the body, the collision body or the character. So I'm rotating the meshes or those sewing patterns in their direction, and also adding the sewing lines and connecting them there as you see me there. I also have turned off my gravity so that it doesn't influence it, so that the cloth that doesn't just fall down as I'm working. This makes the process very easy, and every time I create a new pattern, I simulate the cloth just to see how it's going to affect the entire body. Again, you can find the project files on my Patreon page. That is patreon.com/topchannel1on1. Again, you can find the project files on my Patreon page, that is patreon.com/topchannel1on1. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.